So in this first part, we're going to go over how Guillaume overcame his limiting labels and beliefs to pursue his dreams in the US. Just emigrating, becoming a citizen, and having very limited English skills and what that meant for him, who was already established as a professional in France. We're going to talk about learning to find joy in selling and overcoming limiting beliefs yet again through human connection, and then creating a cohesive narrative, exploring the difference between story and narrative. And narrative shows up in many places. And then we're going to talk about how part of the narrative helps us in this particular instance dispose of our guilt. And in that part, I talk about my own surprise from what he shared. And it was really interesting for me to learn from him. And then at the end of this first part, we're going to start talking about how building a narrative is actually an act of leadership. So that's part one. When you get to the end of that, you'll probably be ready for part two, and that'll be back next week. Hop down to the show notes. We'll have links to his website. He actually has a free gift that we'll talk more about in episode 2, but you can find the links to his website, and then be sure to share this episode with others. So without further ado, let's get the party started.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, this is Sarah, your host of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, where we talk with inspiring guests who have challenged limiting labels and beliefs to pursue and accomplish personal and professional goals. Our goal today is Guillaume Wiatr. Guillaume is the author of Strategic Narrative, a simple method that business leaders can use to help everyone understand their business, get behind it, and believe in it. Now, I've read this book. It is great, and we'll talk about that later with Guillaume, but it's great because it reinforces some of the things I've been seeing, not necessarily having the words for, and so I get to ask Guillaume all about that. His company, MetaHelm, guides CEOs, founders, and leadership teams of professional services firms to gain focus and traction so they build a successful business that they also love. So I think you guys know it's possible to build a successful business and then show up and go, what have I created here? But he's all about making sure that doesn't happen. As a former big firm strategy consultant, Guillaume has founded 4 ventures. He's sought after by senior executives of companies like Alaska Airlines, the Gates Foundation, Generations for Peace, AIG, L'Oreal, Spencer Stuart, Gap, Google, Microsoft, and the US and French governments. That's a variety of clients with different needs. Guillaume teaches and mentors entrepreneurship at startup incubators, EM Lyon International Business School, and the University of Washington Masters of Science Entrepreneurship, ranked number 3 in the US. He has recently been reading Secret Tradecraft of Elite Advisors by David C. Baker. And when he wants to continue to develop and learn, he turns to his mentors, some of whom include George Kao, Shannon Lee, Rick Torseth, and Philip Morgan. So with that, let me welcome today's guest, Guillaume Wiatr. Welcome, Guillaume.
Sarah, thank you so much. Who wrote that bio, by the way?
Hey, some brilliant person, I'm certain. But you know what? I do want to ask you about your story. But first, I want you to critique how I pronounced your name and tell us the origins of that name, because it's your last name. Guillaume's a nice name too, but I'm speaking specifically of your last name.
Look, you did fabulous, and I mean it because we rehearsed a little bit before this recording. Most people say Wiatr or something like that, but it's Wiatr, and that's what you said. So thank you for that. The name Wiatr is a Polish name. It means the wind in Polish. So if there are Polish speakers here on your show, they'll notice that right away. It also has a secondary meaning, less common, that I came across a few years ago. It means the messenger. and it means the messenger. There's a Saint Viatre that used to travel in Europe, from East to Western Europe, and bring messages, tell stories. And there's a town in France, a little village that adopted his name. They turn it into the French spelling. They use the French spelling, but it's called Saint Viatre. And yeah, that's the backstory here. That's the origin of my last name.
Well, I love that story. And I was telling Guillaume listeners that I thought it's so perfect for the work he does in the world, which is about story and bringing story and lifting through story. So I just thought the synergy of his name was great. And I also like I just like the name. So I'll move off of the name, but I like it. I like language and learning the base of words and what they mean, and sometimes even how they've been used. So Guillaume, you have had a different personal journey on your way to the US, and you mentioned in the pre-onboarding work that we do that you had to overcome some of your own limiting labels and beliefs. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, so I now live permanently in Seattle. I am a US citizen, in addition to being a French citizen. I came here in 2008. I married an American woman that I met when I was a teenager, but we got married in our 30s. And I show up here in the Seattle area with very limited knowledge of what this area is about. I had lived in the US before on the East Coast, in San Francisco a little bit for a few months. And I show up here in 2008, in the summer of 2008, thinking, I want to live the American dream. I bought a one-way ticket. We relocated ourselves to the United States. So it was an immigration process, and so I'm a consultant by trade. That's what I've always been doing. And nobody wanted to hire a French consultant who can barely speak English, who knows nothing about the area, the regional economy. And I had to reinvent myself. And the first job I found was the job of a salesperson in a store, in retail. And that felt so wrong, so misaligned with who I am, because all my childhood and my first 10 years of professional life, I was adamant I was the worst salesperson ever. So there was an acquired limiting belief from my past, and also working with people who reinforced that belief very, very much. They helped me with other things, but turns out I became a really, really successful salesperson here in the US. So moving from one continent to the other was just such a powerful experience, because all of a sudden I discover I can do things that are very useful. Selling is a very ancestral art, technique, skill, something very human. It's at the basis of any human relationship. And I learn it, in a different way here. And I realized I can find joy in this and be very successful at it. So that was one of the many limiting beliefs I had to overcome, and I did overcome.
What do you think it was about your personality that made you so successful selling?
Well, okay. The French accent helps.
Good to know.
That's what people tell me. But besides this, and I remember vividly one day I was in a retail store I was working in, and I was observing my colleagues, and they were really trying to engage with customers in a way that felt very scripted, very inauthentic. And one of the reasons why I started to work in retail was because I couldn't find the type of job that I was previously doing. So I thought, what a great way to learn and be curious and meet more people who live in this area and learn about cultural traits and what are I wanted to learn slang, also bad words and expressions that people would have fun using. So for me, it was more of a learning experience. I had no intent to have a career in retail. I stayed 3.5 years, with that retail chain. And I was looking around me and seeing all my colleagues being very, very scripted, not very curious. And for me, my personality was that I want to just chat with people, know who they are, what's happening in their life. I'm also a consultant by trade, so I enjoy asking open-ended questions. So really, that curiosity aspect of my personality propelled me to not see customers as walking wallets, but as humans first, with wants and needs and excitements and troubles, and just like everybody else, right? So I would just spend more time naturally finding out who I am working with, and all of a sudden, it builds trust. You understand what they want, and you feel more confident about telling them either, hey, I don't think we have what you're looking for here. Go to that other place because genuinely they'll be able to help you. Or, based on what you told me, I think I have something you should really take a look at. I think you're going to love this.
As a consumer, when I come across someone who can tell me that, especially in retail, it is such a relief, right?
Right.
There's a few folks in a particular store I'm thinking of, but I go to them because they just say, hey, what you're looking for, you don't want you describe for me what you want. And I tell them, they're going, what you're asking of that thing won't be delivered through the thing you think you want, right? But they know they've asked a lot of questions, and I walk out happy, even if I don't buy. And I always go back to them because I trust them. And
exactly.
They ask questions. And the thing that you just mentioned in that was that whole sense of being curious. So, and just recently listening to what that does to our brains and our ability to grow and learn is just staying curious and open.
Right. Yeah, being open-minded about what may happen, in any of our activities, relationships. What could go great or what could go wrong? What if I say this way? Or, what if I try to ask that question differently? What's going to happen? There's so much joy out of this exercise, I think, Sarah. And many folks forget that aspect of their job, I think, in sales in particular. Now, that doesn't mean that all you do is just being curious. You have to also focus on what you're trying to achieve, which is help people grow a business, sell things, focus on wealth also, and make people happy. So that's the first stage.
Yep, I agree. And before the podcast is over, I'll come back to that because there was something that was about like how to make things, like even if they're boring things, that if you're curious, you can make anything, even if it's boring, not boring. Like you can make yourself a challenge. So just like you said, how could I say that differently? What would happen if I did that? Could I cut my time down on this? So it's all, the curious is a big theme for me. I wanted to ask you, in your book, which I really did enjoy reading, and I appreciate you sending that to me ahead of time. What do you mean when you say that people will pay for a story, but they will die for a narrative? Can you describe the distinction between the two of those and what you mean by that?
Yeah, Sarah, this is that line, I think, is the core, it's foundational element, the core element of how I approach writing this book and what I do in my work. I used to think that stories and narratives are the same thing. And then I started picturing a Venn diagram because one evening I was publishing an email on my email list and caught myself using the words story and narrative interchangeably as synonyms. And I thought, because I'm curious, I thought, wait a minute, let's look at this more closely. Like, if there are two words, there must be a difference, right? And a simple search on the internet that led me to realize that, yeah, there is a difference. A story is closed-ended. First of all, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the typical model that that most of us have heard about, or very common model, is Joseph Campbell, story arc. The hero's journey, where the hero starts on a journey, runs into problems, and ends the journey hopefully successfully. That's an arc that is used with most movies, Hollywood movies, maybe less independent French movies, but it's very common.
Nice plug.
Right. But it's very common. Now the word narrative is, a story is also a narrative, but the narrative is also is something different in addition to this. When we say the narrative about society, the narrative about a company, my narrative, we mean something bigger. We mean something that is ongoing, something that is never really done until we die, unless we die. A narrative it has a beginning, has a middle, but no end. It's open-ended because I use it, and I use this word, and I hear it as more of a modus operandi. It's how you roll. It's very close to culture, right? It's very close to your mode of operation, and it's very unconscious. It's ingrained in the things we don't notice anymore, right? And some people a very long time ago picked up on that. Religions, for instance, really picked up on that, right? The religions have stories to illustrate what their religions is about, but they have a whole narrative that they feed, that they fuel, that they remind people of. If you go to a mosque or a synagogue or a church or anywhere, you feel a certain way. There are certain traditions, there are certain words, certain colors that fuel what I call a narrative, right? So now apply this to what I work on, which is entrepreneurship and businesses. And I noticed that we use the word stories a little bit, we use that too lightly. We think that just because we tell a cool, funny, interesting, or emotional story, that's it. We just have to say this, and then magically people will be amazed, or they'll be dazzled, or we can manipulate them with hooks and stuff. But we forget that what's really more powerful is to be in sync with the right narrative. So you will notice that in companies where people are really engaged, that people really believe in the purpose that is in focus, they will go the extra mile. That's what I mean by they will almost die for a narrative. They will put their life on the line to really go beyond and carry on. And that's way beyond the story. You can buy a book, you can buy a movie. You can send ads to people, emails, and tell them good stories, and people will buy them. Sure, I'll pay $10 for this book or this piece, and that's it, right? And you're not the storyteller. You're not the storyteller. A narrative is socially co-created. You get to be part of it. You get to be invited to be part of a narrative. Political movements know that very well. They have participants. The social justice movement knows that very, very well. And so very practically speaking, where that quote, that line took me is to think about building better narrative for organizations as a system of stories, not just as one story. And I hear this all the time, hey, let's tell our story. Well, which one? Because you have thousands of stories you could tell. It's about you, it's about your teams, about the people you help, maybe it's all of them. So I think about a narrative as a systems with three layers. There are the stories that formulate our intentions, and then stories that we tell with our behaviors, things we practice. Like when I am in a retail store, I may not say a word, but the way I walk around, the way I look at people, the way I help, all my gesture tell a story, right? That fuels the narrative of customer service and of that brand. And the third layer of that system is really what I call the norms, the narrative layers that is that we don't discuss anymore. It's established, it's normalized, it's institutionalized. For instance, when you look at why we recycle things, why do we recycle things? Do you know, Sarah? You know
Uh,
the background?
I know why I do. You mean like way back when that started?
Or
I
why do you,
honestly
let's talk,
anymore, I don't know why. I just do it.
you
It
just do it, right? Right.
it matters to me, so I do it
Why does it matter to you?
because I love the planet and because I hate waste and because I don't want to be. Uh, I can do my part. I guess is really it's like I can contribute
Okay.
and um and even when people tell me, well, in our area it never hits recycle, it hits the landfill. I'm thinking that's not my job. My job is to show up as who I want to be as a human. I can't control the world. So for me, that's my motivation.
Okay.
Um, is to reduce things that are harmful to others, the earth, the ocean, other animals, plant life, that type of thing.
And so that's great. And I'm with you on this. I want to be a responsible contributor, right? And so how do we recycle? We just, it's now automatic. We see a blue bin. We maybe chances are we look at what we have in our hand. Maybe it's a coffee cup, and we go, okay, is this something I can put in the recycle? And it's automated. So all
And
the entire.
alongside that, Guillaume, is
Mhm.
when you look and you're wanting to get rid of something, I'm thinking, why isn't there an extra bin? This is recyclable.
Yes.
Like, what's up here? And
Yeah.
and I will ask, like, do you have a recycle bin? Oh no, I'm thinking, and I will often say, well, how come?
Mm.
Thinking they're all over the place. How come you don't have one? So
It should be normal.
it
It
should
is
be.
institutional, but the origin the origin of that system is comes from the narrative that a shift in narrative from disposing of things makes you feel a bit guilty to disposing of things should be easy. And you not only you dispose of of the item you want to throw away, but you also dispose of the feeling of guilt that you're polluting something. And
Wow.
that
Wait,
narrative.
back up. That's powerful.
Okay.
Say that one more time because
Yes.
just say it one more time, please.
When we recycle something, we dispose of the object, but we also dispose of our guilt.
Okay.
We feel good. We want to be good citizens, good contributors. So we don't.
Absolutely true.
Right? Do you feel good when you like
I
recycle?
do. And I feel good when I'm conscious about the things I purchase.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to achieve. So that's a helpful narrative in that regard. It was well put together to achieve that. Now, the backstory, and if you research where this comes from, this was manufactured, this was put together by plastic manufacturer who saw their sale kind of, that's their growth a little sluggish, and thought, why are we not selling more plastic? Why are we selling packaging? Oh, it's because people feel guilty. So let's come up with something. Let's come up with a system that everybody will adopt, that will make people feel good about throwing stuff away because it gets recycled. I'm not making this up. I researched it. It's well documented.
I am not doubting you. My mind is going to, okay, what are all the other things we've unconsciously done? Because it's making us feel better on a subconscious level. The thing that really got me, what you said, was it helps us throw away our guilt. So that makes, I'm not doubting anything you're saying. I'm just thinking, wow, what other things are working that way in our collective interaction?
Everything.
So, right. But then it makes me wonder about everything, Guillaume.
So we
talking.
We went quite deep here. This is like, I didn't mean this to be a lecture on.
Oh, I love it. No, this is good
good
because this is the point. This is the point of understanding beneath the surface of things.
Right.
How do we change if we don't get that aha moment? Right. And before you and I went live, I was talking about stories being used in marketing and stuff, and how you can see when you pay attention that really they're set up to make us feel we are less than, we're missing out on something. And if we don't act today, we are just going to be left on the sidelines and abandoned, which, in historical, we don't want to be left out of the collective because we will die. So
we want to belong, which was.
Yeah, so I didn't see this one coming. I like it. I really like being surprised like that.
there are many other examples. And and some people tell me, oh yeah, are you talking about how we get manipulated with things? And I say, yeah, in a way you can use that word if behind crafting a narrative you have that intention to manipulate people, but you can also use that mechanism to drive positive change. And when we look at all the big pick one topic, any topic, any change, major change or small change, even in your life. Like I will take my example. I come from France. I think I believe I'm the worst salesperson ever. And a few months later, I'm number one in the region in sales. Right? So you can always
your narrative.
Yeah, I did change my narrative. How did I do it? I went through the three phases that I laid out earlier. First, I had an intention. My intention was to be curious, to help, to belong to a community, to make new connections, to make money because I needed money to feed my family. These were my intentions, but they were just intentions. They were hopes. They were maybe goals, you can call them. And the second thing I did was I practiced it, right? I learned English. And that company I was working with taught me a whole bunch of great sales, very healthy and human sales ways to work. So I practiced that. I was a student, and then until that became, I practiced it so much that it became effective, and then it became second nature, to the point that now when I go into any business, the sales system is one of the first thing I look at, and it surprises my clients because they go, "Oh, don't you want to check our website first and our communication stuff?" And I go, "Yeah, that's only one fraction of a narrative system. I also want to look at how you sell, how you lead, how you organize purposefully as a team, how you communicate within the organization, and how you build a vision as a leader." Not a vision just for the business, but a vision for the outside world. Like, what impact are you trying to have? That typically surprises people a lot because they go from the belief that a narrative is just this 1 or 2 page great story that you enjoy reading to, oh, now they see, okay, it's a much bigger, much broader, much more powerful way to look at things.
Let's dig into that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pull another quote from you.
Sure.
Okay, just so you know it's coming. But you talk about building that narrative not being an act of literature, and you've been kind of talking about that just now, but an act of leadership. So tell a little bit more about that, please, because the whole leadership piece it's really important. I mean, whether we're leading ourselves or leading our businesses or our community.
So I see leadership as a practice. I used to see it as a title. I was very, very influenced by the work of Ron Heifetz in adaptive leadership. One of my mentors, one of the mentors you mentioned at the beginning in the intro of the show, Rick Torsett, educated me quite a bit on this and really opened my eyes. So the first I want to start by defining what we talk about here is a practice, right? So when I say that building a narrative is a practice of leadership, I say I point to the second layer, the second phase of the framework I just described before, which is how do we practice it? You may have intentions to be a better leader, to be curious, to be adaptive, to be, I don't know, name a core value that you want to focus on. And then it's how you practice it. So when building a narrative is not just writing stuff, not just having those good intentions, or not just the values that you label, that you put on your website. Hey, we are this, we're that, we're collaborative, we're great. This. It's also how do I experience it, and so the rubber meets the road. The key is to connect at all levels of everything you do, make the connection between what you say and how you walk your talk. That's really when you start building a narrative. It's about the details. It's about the words you use. For instance, last night I published an article about the fact that I don't use the word competitor or competition in my daily language. I stay away from it. I try to. It's hard because most people around me use that left and right. And I made this conscious choice because language and words are language is performative. You shape the reality that you live in, and therefore you shape the narrative by using specific words. So first I have the intention to keep that jargon away, that forget competitor. But then how do I listen to myself on a daily basis? That's how I practice. That's a very specific goal of mine in my leadership practices. How do I see this, and how do I label or not label people that some of my peers say, oh, you're competitors, and I say, well, you mean my colleagues, my confrères? That's a French Latin confratere, meaning being a brother with or of, because that's what that's what leadership should be about. It should be about practicing how you rally people to go through tough changes, to tough situation and challenges. And so you can only do that. If you look at yourself first.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.